Let's see here. Let me grab my notes. I want to share with you. Today is a very, very special day in my life, my sister's life, and my brother's life. And you guys have heard me talk about my mom before, so it's nothing new if you've been in the CBF world for a while. But I'm rolling up my sleeves here because it's a little bit warm. But you've heard me talk about my mom and the huge impact that she had on my life, and we have some really funny stories and some great uh, lessons that I've learned from her over the years. And I just wrote down a few. I mean, I could probably write pages of lessons that I learned from my mom, but I just wrote down a few to share with you tonight. I'll keep it kind of short and sweet. And I want to make sure that you stay to the very end because I have some. Let me turn off my banner here. Turn that banner off since we're not starting soon. We've already started. But if you stay to the very end, you're going to hear number one, a little bit more about CBF. Number two, you're going to hear the story about my mom starting her cleaning business. And she started it well after I did. And you'll hear the story about my very first coaching client. For those of you who know, I've been coaching now for about 20 years. And a hilarious story about our church and cigarettes. So hang in there. We have some funny things to share with you. But the reason why I thought I'd share today lessons from my mom, wisdom, grit, and the birth of a business is because today is her birthday. Now she's in heaven, so she's celebrating with my dad. They're both having a cup of coffee up there. And she's celebrating with her sister and my dad, her two sisters and my dad, and many others who have gone before them. But today she would have been 95 if my math is correctly. We always laugh because her birthday is easy to remember. It's 10/20/30. 10/20/30, October 20th, 1930 is when she was born. She did pass away right about 7 years ago. So she was 88 years old when she passed. And she left a really incredible legacy. She was one amazing mom. You know, not everybody has the gift of having a wonderful mom that you can relate to and you can talk to and sit up at late nights and have girl talk with, or son and daughter talk with. Not everybody has that, but many of you can be an amazing mom if you didn't have an amazing mom. You can be an amazing mom to somebody you adopt in your life, or to somebody who is in your life as a son or a daughter. So not everybody had the gift of an amazing mom, but I sure did. So I want to share a little bit of her wisdom, her grit, and the birth of a business. So first and foremost, so stay at the very end. So first and foremost, let me grab some water here. Lesson number one, and not all of these lessons were taught out loud, they were lived out loud. But lesson number one, without a doubt, my mom modeled integrity. In other words, just always do the right thing no matter what. Both of my parents were pretty amazing in this regard. They were people of high integrity. I never, ever saw my mom cheat, lie, or steal, right? Not everybody is able to say that of a parent or both, right? I never really saw her cheat, lie, or steal. I'm not saying she didn't do little white lies like, yeah, you look great in that outfit. No, you don't look fat at all in that outfit, right? I'm not saying she didn't say little white lies, lies intended to make sure you don't hurt your feelings. Like, when I was 13 years old, gangly and had braces, I'm sure she said, oh, honey, you're beautiful. So I'm not talking about that. But I mean, in general, my mom never cheated, lied, or stole. I never saw her do unethical things. And just living an ethical life teaches an ethical life. And it is on all of us as business owners and as parents, mothers and fathers, people of influence. It is on all of us to live an ethical life so that people can see ethics. It's not good enough that we want to preach ethics or talk about ethics or talk about the culture in our business. And I just muted myself. So can you please make sure you post and tell me if you can still hear me? Because the reverb was driving me nuts and I couldn't concentrate. So just let me know if you can still hear me. Just say, yes, I can hear you. But um, the way they modeled an ethical, a life of integrity, I believe is what made it easier, not easy, but easier for me to carry over in business, right? Because I think business can be one of the most trying areas in life to compromise your integrity, because especially when you're struggling, especially when you're failing in business and you don't know what else to do, you don't know where else to turn, you're maybe operating in the red, you're going into debt, you can't make your business work, and you start maybe compromising on your own integrity and your own beliefs. But when that was modeled for you and just absolutely a part of the way you think and feel every day, it's less about decisions. Should I lie? Should I steal? Should I cheat the government? Should I cheat the customer? It's less about the decision. This decision is already made when you've seen integrity and ethics modeled for you. And if you didn't have the gift of a parent that modeled ethics and integrity, then you have to learn it. You have to embrace it. You have to teach it to yourself. And this is even harder. You have to exercise the discipline of choosing the right thing no matter what. And that is really what my mom taught me. Choose the right thing no matter what the consequence is. Choose the right thing no matter what the consequence is. Now, I have a lot of shameful moments in my early days of business where I was struggling, I was broken, I was scared, I was going in debt. And I won't tell you all the dumb, stupid, and horrible things I did in the early days because I'm ashamed of some of them. I'm ashamed of most of them. Luckily, I made enough stupid mistakes that you guys don't have to make them. But I remember one particular time I had an employee that got hurt on the job. And because we didn't have workers' comp, back then everybody was 1099. Nobody really was legal. Technically, they weren't legal because if I were ever audited, I would not have won the audit against whether or not my workers are legitimate 1099 or W-2. But because they were 1099 and I was scared to death and she got hurt on the job and she had her own health insurance, I said, don't tell them you got hurt on the job when you go to the hospital. And I knew that was wrong, but I was scared. I was afraid that they would find out she got hurt on the job. They would try to file some workers' comp claim on me. Then I would have to admit I don't carry workers' comp and everyone's at 1099. And I just thought they'd put me out of business. I was very young, very immature, and didn't have a clue what the heck I was doing. Now, probably none of that would have happened. But the real issue is I have never forgotten, after 35 years ago, I've never forgotten the lie I asked someone else to tell on my behalf. It has bothered me since then. Do you know it's so easy to do the right thing and then your conscience is clear for the rest of your life? And it is so easy to do the wrong thing, especially if you won't get caught and no one will know. The problem is there's always a trade-off for everything we do. Everything we do. And so even if you choose to do the wrong thing, to lie or cheat the government or cheat a customer, or cheat an employee or cheat the system, whatever, you really don't get away with it because you will go to your grave remembering the thing you did wrong when you had a chance to do the right thing. To this day, it bothers me that I asked her to lie for me and I never did it again. It did teach me a lesson. Don't ever do that again. It is not worth the pain and suffering of knowing I did the wrong thing. So my mom always modeled, taught, and stressed, do the right thing. Always do the right thing no matter what. And yes, there is such a thing as right or wrong. And I don't care what society tells you. Well, everything is gray. That's baloney. That's what people say who constantly choose doing the wrong thing. Makes them feel better. Lesson number 2, and I don't talk about this too much, but if you guys know me very well at all, you know faith is a part of my life. And my mom, my parents, they were not very religious, but she definitely gave us a strong sense of faith and eternity. They, you know, especially my mom, more so than my dad. My dad was amazing too, but She really had a true faith in God, and she made sure we went to church, we went to Sunday school, we believed in Jesus, and we believed in the Bible. Everything else was kind of up for grabs. She was truly a person of faith, maybe not so much a religious person. And there's a big difference. I have strong beliefs around the difference between, faith and religion. But she made sure that we had faith, that we understood that we were made in the image of God, that we weren't just animals and that we had no value in this world, that we had value because we were made in the image of God. And I believe that faith helped me throughout life, because if you believe you're made in the image of God, even on your worst day, when you feel like a failure, when you feel worthless, and I had many, many days in business where I felt worthless as a business owner. I felt like a complete failure as a business owner. There were months and sometimes years where all I experienced were the emotions of failure. And it's not fun, but my faith gave me the firm belief that there's more to me than my finances. There's more to me in my value than my pocketbook, than my checkbook, than my bank account. There's more to my value in this world than the type of car I drive or the type of house I live in. There's more to me in my value as a human being than the degrees that I don't have. I don't have a college degree. I don't have an MBA. I don't have a PhD. Now, my kids have those, but I don't. Right? And so I believe it was the grounding of our faith that taught us that I am made in the image of God. Therefore, I have value and I have worth, no matter how big or how small my bank account is, no matter how fancy or how crummy my house is, whether I own a house or I own multiple houses or I rent a crappy little apartment, which we did when we first got married. Whether I drive a dumpy old car, a rusted out old car that had no air conditioning in 100-degree weather in Texas back in the early days, or I drove a brand new BMW sitting in my driveway, right? That my worth was not dependent on other people's opinions of me. That when you're made in the image of God, you have high value and high worth above the animals, above the earth, above the atmosphere, above the climate. You have high individual worth just because you're a human being made in the image of God. I think that was probably one of the most important lessons I ever could have learned. And it is why I believe as kids, as teenagers, especially my sister and I, we both valued ourselves as girls. Growing up in Miami, we valued ourselves. Why? Because we were made in the image of God. Now, my mom wasn't religious, but she was still a woman of faith. She worked for the church. She was like a secretary back in the day. That's what they called them. She was a secretary. So, they had to live up to certain standards when you worked. And this was like an old fashioned country Baptist church way back in the day. And I mean, they had all kinds of crazy strict rules. I break all of them now. But one of the things that my mom did, but none of her Baptist friends knew, although they probably did, was she was a smoker, right? Back in the 60s and 70s, everybody smoked. And back in the 40s and 50s, they told you it was healthy, right? In fact, back in the 50s, they would smoke while they were pregnant. Maybe that's why I've lost a few brain cells. I don't have a clue. But my mom was a smoker. So she was always smoking cigarettes. And of course, we went to a Baptist church where they preached against everything. I mean, everything. And so I remember one Sunday after church, and we were little. So, I mean, we were preteen, probably 8, 9, 6, 7. We were pretty young. And after church, my mom took us to Burger King. That was kind of like the highlight of our week. After church, we went to Burger King for lunch. And my mom lit up her cigarette because back in the day, everybody smoked indoors. You smoked in restaurants. You smoked at your office, right next to your coworkers in your office. She lit up a cigarette in Burger King. And as little kids, we were fussing at her. We were like, Mom, What would you do if Pastor Hatch, his name was Hatch back then, what would you do if Pastor Hatch came into Burger King right now while you're smoking that cigarette? So as little kids, we're preaching at our mother. I guess she should have taught us honor your father and your mother. And she said, I would just sit here and smoke my cigarette, even if the pastor walked in. And she was a young woman. We're young kids. And I'm telling you, well, looked out the window and there's the pastor and his 4 kids piling out of their car, heading to Burger King for lunch. I have never seen my mother stomp out a cigarette so fast in all my life. Because back then you threw your cigarette on the floor and you stomped on it right there in the store, right there, wherever you were. That's the way it was back in the day. She dropped that cigarette and stomped on it. And we laughed and we giggled like little kids and we all laughed. My mom laughed, we all laughed. And so we never let her live that down until she was in her 80s. We would remind her of the time that the pastor came into the Burger King and she defied her behavior, even if he had walked in the door. She was a lot of fun. My mom was so fun. We had so much fun with her. Her and my dad, they were both fun. But she was more fun than my dad. He was more serious, a little more stoic. But her faith never got in the way of religion. And so she was a smoking Baptist. All right, lesson number 3. I promise I'll go a little bit faster. Lesson number 3. This might be my favorite lesson of all from my mom because it is a gift she gave to myself, my sister, and my brother. And this is the attitude of confidence. The attitude of confidence. Now, sometimes it didn't serve me well because back in the early days, I was dumb as a rock, but I sure thought I was smarter than I was. But luckily I was determined. So I read every book I could get my hands on and I educated myself. One of my favorite quotes from my favorite speaker, Jim Rohn, who's late great speaker, Jim Rohn, is formal education will make you a living. Self-education will make you a fortune. And I'm living proof of that because none of us in my family, my immediate family, went to college and got degrees. My sister actually went to college, but didn't finish and didn't get her degree that I know of. I don't think she did. But college, we weren't college bound. We were kind of a blue collar thinking family. And all of my learning and my skills are self-taught through books, webinars, hired the best coaches in the world to help me. And but she did pass on the attitude of confidence to all 3 of us kids. My brother is a successful entrepreneur. My sister has had a thriving, successful career in the corporate world with AT&T, retired from there and started her own maid service. 7 years later, they're over $1 million and took over 30 trips in a single year while building their cleaning business. Of course, they followed the CBF model. So what I love about the attitude of confidence that my mom gave us is my mother showed and lived a can-do attitude. Like the word can't was not in our vocabulary. It was how, or how long will it take, or how hard will it be? But it was never, I can't do it. And so that attitude really saved my business in the early days when I was failing, because I never believed that I would fail completely and have to quit and go do something else. I always believed that I'll eventually hit rock bottom and climb my way out of this terrible, dark pit. And truthfully, that did happen every time. Now, it didn't have to be as difficult, and it didn't have to, the pain didn't have to endure as long, but I didn't have coaches and mentors back in the day to help me. But it was the attitude of confidence that, oh, I will succeed. I don't know how long I'm going to be unsuccessful, but eventually I will succeed, is what carried me through every time I wanted to quit. Every time I wanted to quit, every time I thought, oh my gosh, surely I've hit rock bottom. Next year's got to be better. Every time, maintaining the attitude of confidence helped me not quit. And so 97% of employees out there work for the 3% of entrepreneurs who chose not to quit, Thankfully, I became in that 3% who didn't quit. And now I'm in the top 1% of all maid services in the world. So that attitude of confidence. So let me tell you how that attitude of confidence manifested itself in my mom's life. Pretty much everything she set out to do. Oh, I wanted to show some pictures before I forget. I had a note in here to show some pictures, but here is, let's see, how do I do that? Oops, wrong one. Add to the stage. There it is. That's a picture of my mom. Not maybe just a few years before she passed. And let's see if I can make this one pop up on stage. That's early days. That was probably my mom in her 20s. Super cute. Mom in her 20s. And then that's a picture of my mom on her, I think it was her 80th birthday. So she passed at 88. So that's my sister, my brother, and my sweet mom, who was the queen for the day. We had a lot of fun as a family. Lots of fun. Let me see if I can make that picture get smaller. So anyway, so let me go back to my notes here. So her attitude of confidence, she knew she would succeed at everything she tried. She didn't try stupid stuff, right? She didn't try to be an NFL player. But just about everything my mother attempted, she succeeded at. I really can't think of a single time she tried to do something and failed at it. I can't. If she did, she didn't tell us about it. But out of the blue, my mom calls up, and this is before cell phones. So my mom calls me out of the blue on a landline. And, back then you talked on Saturdays when the rates were cheaper. And she said in her smoker's grovelly voice, because she never gave up smoking, she said, "Honey, I want to start a maid service. Teach me everything you know." And that's how she talked in her latter years. So she was turning 65 and she wanted to retire from AT&T. She had been there probably close to 20 years. And she was ready to, in fact, it was my sister that got my mom that job. And maybe it was 10 years, but it might have been 20. I'm not sure. But anyway, she was ready to retire for good. So she calls me up and she says, "I'm turning 65." And we were having a big birthday party for her. So I remember this. And she said, "I want to start a maid service." And I remember thinking, well, my mom has worked her entire life. Like, she was the first mom on the block to get a job. All the other moms were stay at home when I was in elementary school. Women stayed at home back then and raised the kids. And my mom was the first woman on the block to go to work at a real job. So I was considered a latchkey kid. And at 65 years old, after having a career working as a secretary, working at AT&T, I think she was an admin assistant, helping my dad in his various ventures over the years. He was a little bit more entrepreneurial. She worked for the church, blah, blah, blah. She always had a job. So she said, "I want to start a maid service. Teach me everything you know." Now, by the time she had called me, that was probably close to 25 years ago, I'd finally hit my first $1 million and I had a very successful cleaning business. And, back then, $1 million was more like 2 million today. Because back then our rates were like 25, 30 an hour. Now our rates are over 60 and 65 an hour. And so she says, "I want to start a maid service. Teach me everything you know." And I remember saying, "Mom, you've never cleaned a house in your life. We always had a maid growing up, always, because I had a working mom. We always had somebody who cleaned our house." And she said, "Shoot, I'm not going to clean. I'm going to be like you. I'm going to run employees and they will clean." And it was the first time that it ever occurred to me that somebody could actually start a cleaning business without cleaning, because I hadn't done that. I cleaned for 8 years trying to create a business out of thin air. And so it never really occurred to me that somebody could start a business and never actually pick up the mop. And if anybody could do it, it was my mom, because my mom was not about to get out there and scrub toilets and sweep anybody's floors. It was not going to happen. She had long manicured nails and, had to have lots of smoke breaks. And I said, "Yeah, I think I can try to help you." So my mom became my first coaching client. Now, of course, I didn't charge her a dime. I wasn't even coaching professionally back then. I was just building my business and maintaining it and trying to create more freedom and trying to build more systems and predictability into my business. But I knew I had a great model. And I said, Mom, just follow everything I tell you. So I would fax her over my forms. I would fax her my customer agreements, my customer contracts. I would remember back in the day when there was such a thing as a fax machine. Whenever I visit her, I would bring packets of information with her, things to copy, my customer guidelines, brochures, my job application. And back then you would run copies, right? We weren't using email. There were no digital MS Word back then, didn't exist. And so she would just run copies of things that I had typed up on an old-fashioned typewriter, Selectric typewriters. I mean, we're talking back in the day. So she'd run copies of everything and she'd type up her own versions of these things. And lo and behold, within a year, my mom is a full-fledged maid service and had an office manager because she wasn't going to fool with the shenanigans of employees who call in sick and cause trouble. She wanted to deal with that mess. And so she was always a great delegator. And so she started her maid service. I think it was within 2 years, she had like 14 employees. She was doing well over $500,000, $600,000 a year, had a full-time office manager, had an office, and she was insanely successful as a second career that she created out of thin air, and she became my first coaching client. She was your guinea pig. I taught her everything the way I do it. And I had a very unique approach to maid service. So she would always try to try different things that she would see other maid services do. And I'm like, don't do that. That'll wreck you. Don't do that. That'll make you unprofitable. Mom, don't do that. They need to be W-2, not 1099. And so I taught her my CBF formula. Now, it wasn't called CBF back then, but it is exactly what I teach today. The CBF way, the CBF formula, the CBF system. And it was her attitude of confidence that led her to go into it thinking, of course I'm going to be successful. You're going to teach me everything I need to know. Like there wasn't one time she assumed she wouldn't be successful. I don't remember one time her saying, oh, I'm so sorry I can't come visit you for the kid's birthday because 2 people quit. I have to stay behind and take care of the business. Or, I'm sorry you're visiting from out of town, but I have to go clean a house. Not one time, because she followed my system to a T. And she knew from day one, the owner never cleans, and how to guarantee the owner doesn't have to clean without the business falling apart, because that's part 2 of that scenario, right? But it was her attitude of confidence that allowed her to start a cleaning business at age 65, become highly successful, operate it for over 20 years, literally nearly 23 years. It gave my mother meaning in her latter years of life when she was all alone, because my father passed away, lost his battle with cancer at age 51. So she spent 30 plus years, 38 years alone, never remarried. No one was ever good enough to be, for her. It was like nobody would ever measure up to my dad. So it was like that she was not going to remarry and settle for some second choice. And so she literally ran the business till 30 days before she passed. And it gave her meaning. It gave her purpose. It gave her a reason to wake up every single day. It meant there were people who relied on her every day for a paycheck, for a quality service. She loved her clients. She loved her employees. It was a phenomenal business. Now, it shrank as the years went on. She wasn't as driven or aggressive. I think by the time she passed, she probably only had like 6 or 7 employees. But hey, it was still a good income, a lot of profit and lots of stability and tons of meaning. So the attitude of confidence. And then the last one I'm going to share with you. I have several more that I wrote down, but I'm going to share just one more because it is getting late. The last one, she modeled this beautifully. I don't believe my parents ever spoke this. They lived it. They lived generosity. Like, I remember one time watching my dad delicately pack up our children's clothing that we had outgrown. And I was little, so I'm going to guess I was between age 6 and 7, but I remember this to this day. I will never forget it. It was probably around 6 or 7. And back in the day, you got to remember, this was back in the late 60s, early 70s, when you had garbage collectors and everybody had those metal galvanized aluminum garbage cans. And they would literally go to your backyard and go get them. But then as the years passed, you had to put them out on the front driveway for the garbage collectors to empty your garbage cans. They were all hand emptied. There weren't machines back then that emptied the cans like they do now, like Waste Management does now. And so these garbage men, they would hang on the back of the truck. The truck would drive the next house. They would jump off the truck, go grab the garbage bins, go dump it into the garbage truck and bring the bins back to your house and put the lids back on. But this particular time, I watched my dad carefully pack a bunch of our children's clothes that we had outgrown, just neatly folded and packed into a box. And then he set it out on the garbage bins. Because you got to remember, back in the day, there wasn't really Goodwill. There was no such thing as Facebook Marketplace like we all have today. There just wasn't a lot of like charitable ways to get clothing to people. And so he set 2 boxes of very nice children's clothes, gently worn and used, clean and folded in these boxes. But he opened the boxes so it was obvious what was inside. And then my dad watched with me as we kind of peeked over the couch, looking out the window, and he watched with excitement to see what would happen. And I remember how my dad, giddy, he started chuckling when one of the garbage men stopped. He was about to take the box and throw it in the trash, the dump truck. And he stopped and he looked in and he started digging. He took the box and he put it in the front seat of the cab. And my dad was so happy. That was the kind of generosity they had, quiet generosity. They didn't give publicly and look for praise. And I remember one time, you got to remember, this was a long time ago when there was no laws against open container. One time my dad set cold beers out on top of the garbage can lids for the garbage men, just because they were ecstatic. It was just the way he was. And so it's no wonder that when my mom started her maid service, she went all in with cleaning for a reason. So cleaning for a reason was my mother's favorite thing. Number one, it gave her a chance to brag about her daughter. I mean, she was bragging about me all the time. Did you know my daughter was featured on the Today Show? Do you know my daughter was featured in this magazine or that magazine or on this radio show or this TV morning show? Reader's Digest. I think she loved it more to brag on her daughter than anything else, but she loved it because my dad lost his battle with cancer and she beat her battle with cancer, which, was in her 60s. And that was scary, thinking was she's not going to beat ovarian cancer, but she did. And so, of course, as a cleaning service, she joined Cleaning for a Reason from day one. And I remember she used to put up a Christmas tree every year. Let's see if I can bring that up and show it to you. Every year in her office, so her maid service business office where all her girls would come in and get their paychecks and their schedules and their keys, every year at Christmas, she would put up a Cleaning for a Reason Christmas tree decorated with cleaning elements, cleaning gloves, cleaning microfiber towels, toilet brushes were hanging on the tree, and all things swag from Cleaning for a Reason. And she had Cleaning for a Reason signage. And she was always in a contest to clean the most cancer patients. And when she found out that there was an award that you could receive for top 10 most giving maid services in Cleaning for a Reason, and she missed it by just a few, she was so mad. She determined she would clean every cancer patient that calls her until she gets in the top 10. And thankfully, the year she passed, but before she passed, she received her plaque from Cleaning for a Reason that she was in the top 10. She was so happy, but boy, she was mad when she did not make that list. So generosity, selflessness, the value of giving, both my parents modeled that. And that was definitely a strong message that she sent. My brother is the same way. He would give the shirt off his back to a stranger. My sister and Glenn, they're the same way. And of course, that manifested itself in my life, in my giving at my church, and starting Cleaning for a Reason. I don't want to make it about me because it was really about her, but she gave freely of her time, her money, and her love. So those are some of my favorite lessons. I have 4 or 5 more that I've written down, but I'm not going to take the time today. But in honor of her birthday today, 10/20/30, if you want to make a donation in her name in honor of Gladys, you can go to debbiesardone.com/charity. debbiesardone.com/charity. I'll see it, and just make any size donation, $10, $100, I don't care, in honor of Gladys, if you'd like to do that, because today is her birthday, and that would be a great gift for her. She'll be in heaven looking down at everybody who models generosity. And the first step to success in any business and success in your life is to give first. Most people say, I'll give when I can afford it. I'll give when I finally become successful. And the truth is, what leads to success is giving. Give, 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 give before you take. And so I believe she modeled that beautifully in our lives. And my brother, my sister, and myself are the better for it. I'm so grateful for the lessons that she taught us, her lessons in wisdom, grit, and then the course, the birth of a business, and how she inspired me to keep going instead of giving up and quitting. So debbiesardone.com/charity. If you want to make a donation in the honor of Gladys for Cleaning for a Reason. And also, just a reminder for those of you who are still cleaning, but you are business owners, this is for business owners, and you want to attend my 90 days mop-free training. It's coming up on Thursday at 4 p.m. Central. It's kind of late for people who clean, but still have to run the business, so they need it to be later in the day. So you can go to our Cleaning Business Profits page and register for the 90 days mop-free training that's coming up on Thursday. So I hope this was helpful. I hope this was a little bit inspirational. I would love for you to make comments, a little bit about what were some amazing lessons that you learned from your mom. Any particular lesson that stands out that you learned from your mom, I would love for you to post it in the comments, please, because I will read each and every one of them. And if you want to receive text every time I go live, we'll make sure we have some kind of a sign up link. I used to have one, but I don't use that one anymore. And we'll make sure we're not bothering people that don't want to be texted when I go live. So sorry for the little bit of technology problems I had in the beginning. But if I go live more using StreamYard, maybe I'll work out all these bugs and kinks. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thank you for joining me live. Thank you, Samantha, for sending out notifications at the last minute. You are a gem. I appreciate that. So guys, thank you. Also, in case you were wondering, I think I saw somebody ask on one of the channels, in case you're wondering, what is CBF? What is Cleaning Business Fundamentals? If you want to learn more, that is our training program for people who own residential cleaning businesses. Generally speaking, it's people with 8 to 10 employees who are cleaning. They have lots of employee turnover and they're frustrated. They don't have enough profit. They're usually at about $15,000 to $20,000 a month, and they've been stuck there a while. Cleaning Business Fundamentals is definitely for you if you own that residential cleaning business and that describes you. You can visit explorecbf.com if you want to learn more. And if you want to book a time to talk with one of our coaches, explorecbf.com. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this. We'll talk to you next time I go live, and share some of those lessons that you've learned from your mom, please, in the comments and in the chat. Thank you.